Hello everybody, Bill Owen from MNPC Tech along with the Mosquito from Mosquito Mods on YouTube. We're looking at the brand new Define R6 by Fractal Design, and this is the tempered glass edition in the gunmetal finish. Moss, what is your first reaction to seeing the new Define R6?
What'd they change? No, wait. I mean, it looks just like everything you would expect out of a Fractal Design Define case. So definitely no surprises there. It's still got, just as nice of a front look. I love that minimalistic, hide everything sort of approach. I like this window. It's nice and clean. It looks really sleek, and it also looks pretty well done.
It's seamless, Moss. It's their new seamless tempered glass panel design. No more thumb screws, Mom.
Yeah, well, sort of. None on the side anyway.
Right.
I mean, if you wanna be super safe, you can put 2 thumb screws in the back. Otherwise, these do just pop off, which we can get into later. But I think my favorite improvement, anybody remember the Define R5 modu vents? I wonder how many of those things broke and people had to, try and get replacements for. But so up top, once again, we have modu vents just like we used to have, but these are redesigned completely from the old ones. This thing is heavy. I noticed that the first time I popped it off. I was like, wow, that's heavy. So it has your mesh kind of stored in it, which I guess is just a convenient place to store it because you really don't get any airflow when you have the main cover on. And this part is a little bit tricky to get out. But once you get this plastic filter out, you can see that the top panel itself goes back to that sound deadening material that we have. You kind of, if you've owned a couple of Fractal Design cases in the Define series, you probably know of that stuff. So it's pretty nice. I mean, that would obviously be what they intend for the silent mode when you have everything all buttoned up and closed up so that you have pretty much, well, you have no airflow on the top, but you have all of the available options for trying to keep the noise levels down. But then, if you do want airflow, you can just pop out this mesh filter, and then it also has this little grate, and that goes in just the same way that the modu vent did originally. So now you have your top ventilation. That pops out the same way. I like it. That was definitely well thought out and a pretty needed improvement in my opinion. This is an all new design for this top panel. And it is removable independent of the rest of the chassis. So you can take this out to mount fans or radiators or whatever. And it also has 2 nice little tabs right here, one in the back and one in the front, just to help keep this thing from rattling around, which is also really nice because the last thing you want is an obnoxious rattle when you're trying to keep your computer quiet. So up top, you kind of, get your standard array of headphone, microphone, reset, power, and then your LED for power and hard drive activity is always, through this little slot in the middle. They are all black instead of having your USB 3.0s blue, but you do get a pair of 3.0 ports and a pair of 2.0 ports. And that's pretty much standard for Fractal Design these days. And then you also get this nice brushed front. It is plastic, but they've always done a pretty good job of matching everything with paint. And then you kind of get your side ventilation over here too, and that's the same on both sides. Then when we open it up, you can see that you do still get a 5 1/4 inch bay. So that's fun, I guess. I don't know. I guess a lot of people don't care for 5 1/4 inch bays, but maybe a fan controller, it's a good spot for one, I guess. You can keep it hidden, but then you also have a front grate that matches the top if you take that off, and this is also fairly easy to get out. You just push down on the top tab and that comes out. That's also your filter. Behind there we have room to mount, right from the factory it looks like we get a pair of 140 millimeter Fractal Design fans, but you can also mount up to 3 120 millimeter fans as well. And once again, you get that same sound deadening material on the front. And for those of you that have followed Fractal Design, probably know that this is kind of where they all started, with the whole keep the computer as quiet as we can get it and make sure that everything we can do is done to keep your computer silent. And the thing that they also did really well was you get an awful lot of quality for your money. And then I think they just sort of naturally branched out from there because so many people liked them.
You can also swap the door to the other side if you're left or right-handed, whichever you prefer or whatever your orientation is on your desk or below it.
Then also on the front, you have access to your filter, which feels a bit like one of those clown gags. It's so long, but it does cover the entire length of the case. So that is nice that no matter what you have on the bottom of your case for fans or power supply or whatever, it's going to be filtered. So that's really nice. And it's also a pretty nice plastic frame, so it doesn't feel that flimsy or anything. And that's just, it's really nice that that's in the front because, I mean, if you had to get your computer case that far from the back wall, that would just suck. And then you can also pop off the front panel, which actually does come off a lot easier without the filter. Trying not to send it flying across the room, but once again, pretty standard. You just sort of snap it in, snap it off. And it's not attached. Gotta love that, right? At least that's something we love around here. Here we are checking out the bottom of it, and you get enough room to mount what looks like up to a pair of 140 millimeter fans. Presumably you could also fit a radiator down there if you wanted to. And then you also have your power supply intake there. And just to kind of show what we were talking about before, covers everything, so that's nice. You get the little plastic feet with the rubber on the bottom of them to minimize any vibrations that would come through the case into the desk. And I'm a detail kind of person, so I like that they have a little raised lip all the way around their little model number and serial number sticker. It's just the little things. All right, we're saving you the details of the other 3 screws, but there's 4 screws that hold this top panel in, 2 towards the front. So just to kind of go over them, we've got 1 here and 1 there, and then the same thing in the back. But then after that, the whole top panel comes out. So you have room to mount up to a 420 millimeter fan, so 3 140s in the top, or a 360 also. It did look like you were limited on radiator thickness for at least the 420. I think probably the 120, as far as what you can put in there. And you can't get too wide of a radiator because you might start running into this panel in the front, which is removable. But if you want to keep that, just make sure that you keep the radiator in between there. But that shouldn't be too bad because your screw holes only go up to the side over there. So
look at this.
What is that for? I like that. Just drop in a little fill port. Look at that.
Beautiful. Now that is some thought going into our design.
Fill ports? Who uses fill ports? I like using fill ports.
Oh, I like them. Absolutely. For maintenance? Are you kidding me? And by the way, shout out to the legendary Danger Den. That's who I got that fill port from. Unfortunately, they're no longer open anymore, but a legendary liquid cooling company from the U.S. Before we remove the tempered glass side panel, this is an entirely new design on the market, and the glass is actually attached to the steel panel, and Fractal describes this design as seamless, and it is. And this was inspired by the Define S side panel window that I did for their Computex build a few years ago. Yes, I'm taking credit for that one, Moss. But yeah, it came out brilliant, and I'd like to see more companies do this just because we can both agree the annoying 4 thumb screws to put the side panel on, and you're trying to align it and adjust it while supporting the weight. But here's another nice thing about this panel, which is an entirely new design. As Moss takes it off, we're going to take a look at the back side and how it's attached.
So there are 2 thumb screws that you can put in, one in the top, one in the bottom, and I'm pretty sure it's shipped that way. So if you're not going to be messing with it, then you probably want to do that. But otherwise, just pop the back off. So we can kind of see these little push pins here, the ball and socket little throwback kind of, I think Leon Lee used to do that a lot, but it works really well here because you have the little sockets here on the side, and these are only in the back, so you still get the security of having the front that kind of has the ledge that clips onto the front, and then you just push that on the back. So even though it's kind of a nice quick release thing, you don't lose the security. So it's just nice to be able to pop your tempered glass side panel on and off. I think there's only been one other that I recall that's that easy. Okay, so the curious minds had to take a look at this and figure out how they did it. And it looks like they just ended up painting the backside of the glass, because this is on the glass, and then they must have just glued the metal frame to the backside of that, and you can see that it overlaps a little bit. So that's how they managed to get that on there so clean without being able to see any adhesive or anything. All right, so checking out the top, once again, you get more room for 140 or 120, also mounted in slots. So if you have a radiator for an all-in-one or a custom water cooling loop, you can adjust that up or down based on which side you want to have the ports on or which end you need more room at. And then you also get your standard I/O cutout, and you get 7 PCI slots, standard for your ATX. And you also get dual slot vertical PCI slots, so that's kind of cool. I know they've had single slot in the past for probably things like audio or maybe the little rheostat for a fan controller or something, but now you get dual, so you could mount a graphics card there if you want. If you already have a PCI riser cable from maybe you already did something to one of your other cases and modded it, you can go ahead and use that as long as it's long enough to make that distance. Or Fractal Design also will be selling these separately, so it doesn't come with the case, but you will have the option to purchase one from Fractal Design. We unfortunately don't know how much that's going to be yet. We don't have a retail price for it at the moment, but it is about a 200 millimeter cable, so that should be plenty to get from your motherboard, whichever slot, to your graphics card. We've got our Gigabyte Aorus RX 580 mounted in the vertical GPU, and we have it hooked up with this cable here, and so you can see there's plenty of cable length on that. So that's not even a straight line down to the graphics card, but yeah, as you can see, you have a pretty good amount of space, and it definitely shows off your graphics card nicely and just right out of the box. So that's pretty cool. Just gotta buy that cable or supply your own if you already have one, and you're off to the races. And then finally, down at the bottom, you have a power supply bracket, which is removable. There's 2 thumb screws that lets you take this bracket off, and then you could have that whichever direction you want your power supply to face, whether you want it fan up or fan down, and then you just mount that on there, and then you can go ahead and screw that onto the back of the case once you slide the power supply in. You have a shroud that'll cover the bottom from front to back, and then there's also kind of a mesh slot pattern cut out of the top, and you do have 2 spaces to mount drive trays. You can see the back side of it up here, but there's 2 SSD trays that mount on the back of the motherboard tray, but there's also 2 slots and then a screw to mount those up here if you wanted to. And then you just run your cables back down through either the grommet that's here, or there's also a hole back here. You can see that they have a new grommet pattern here. It's sort of a half hex, it's like they took the hex and then just cut it so that the 2 pieces met going down the middle. Those are kind of cool. It's a different design that I kind of like, actually. I'm not going to take them out. I'll leave those in there. Bill's already got enough footage of me struggling to put grommets back in. But yeah, so you have pretty much the whole front side of the motherboard covered, and then regardless of where your CPU power is, you have one over on that side and one over on this side, so that's really nice. And then it also came with the standoffs pre-installed for ATX, And something else that a lot of people seem to be doing now is you get a little indexing pin here. So when you set your motherboard in there, you can automatically get it in the right spot just because that pin will line up. And then in case you need it, you can also, stand off by letter. So if you have ATX, micro ATX, or mini ITX, you just follow the instructions and you put all the standoffs in those holes, and then it'll get you all set up to be in the right spot. All right, on this front side, we have a little cover plate that's held in place by 2 captive thumb screws. And then there's just 2 tabs in the front. There's really not much to this plate. It's just sort of a blank plate that has their name, and then also the fact that it was designed in Sweden on the front. So let's see, Bill, what would you do with that?
I'd make a machined aluminum version and maybe put the fractal snowflake engraved in it.
That'd be pretty cool. Especially if you did something like that too, like if you were doing some sort of a custom paint on your case, you could also, do your own side panel, engrave it, and then paint over the top of it, and then, paint the whole thing, I guess, and then just sort of sand off the top, and then you could end up with just the background color of the snowflake or something like that. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
You could also easily, I think, make something like this out of acrylic if you wanted to etch it and then edge light it or something. Blank. It's blank is what it is. So it's
a blank canvas for art, if you ask me.
Just waiting for you to mod
personalize your Define R6.
Well, I guess we might as well just look at the back of that side. So here you also have the back side of your 3.5-inch drives. You can also mount 2.5-inch drives to that. And you can fit up to, what did we figure out, 11 of them, I believe? But we'll cover that more in depth when we get to the other side. But this panel is removable once you remove all the drive trays. So you can either get rid of it completely if you wanted to, or you can move it back so that you have it kind of on the back side, more like a Define C.
So what we have here is a scale, and I was just talking to Moss about my time with Fractal Design at CES in 2010 at their booth, and one of my favorite things to do was hand people a side panel just so they could get an idea of how hefty these side panels are for Fractal Design cases, and the reason being is that they're designed for isolating noise and vibration. So Moss, I'm going to guess that the one on the new Define R6 is probably 3 pounds.
Well, let's see. I'm going to guess just under 3.5. And if you beat me, I'm totally going to claim that this is because you're throwing back to your old circus performing days where you would step right up, guess your weight for a nickel. I'm just kidding. I don't think Bill actually did that. Well, let's see here.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. Well, that was closer. It's like right on 4 pounds.
Wow, 4 pounds. That's how much the side panel weighs. So why does this side panel weigh so much? Well, it's got that sound isolation material on the back that Moss showed earlier on the front bezel door.
And it certainly seems to work. Definitely gives it a different feel and a different sound, like when you're taking it off and there's just all those little rattles and the noise that you're used to hearing on a cheaper computer case. Then you take a side panel off and it's just not there. I guess the first thing we'll take a look at here quickly on the back is you get 2 of these 2.5-inch drive trays, and this is another new design. So they kind of slot on there. There's 2 little cutouts and then 2 little tabs on the tray, and then the single screw. But then you can also take those, and there's the 2 little holes on the front. So there's one there, one here. And then you can put your 2.5-inch drives up here if you wanted to have up to 2 of them up here. I think it only comes with 2 of these trays, and I don't know that you can buy additional, but I don't think it'd be that hard to DIY for making something if you needed to, if you wanted to put up to 4 of them in there. But speaking of drives, if you need more than just 2 2.5-inch drives, you can have up to 6 more 2.5-inch drives. They also fit 3.5-inch drives. And you get 6 of these trays, which are just a single thumb screw away from being removed. And then the front has kind of a plastic tab with a thing that slots into this hole up front. So those are pretty quick and easy to put in. And then if you wanted to have it more secure, there's also room for a screw from the other side, but if that's not enough, you could move these around wherever you want them, but if you could also get these trays, you'd have room for up to 5 more of them. So you could have 11 drives in the front, plus 2 more on the back side of the motherboard tray for your SSDs, and then chances are you could also have an onboard NVMe, or I guess you could still do SATA M2 drive, and you can fit a lot of drives in here. So here we're just mounting one of the SSD trays with an SSD in it. And look at that, you even have a nice amount of space here, so you can use your 90-degree connectors if you have them. Something that anybody that's been following Bill's channel will know that I have a pretty keen eye for that, because I've been burned by that before and it's obnoxious. So good work, I like it. Then move it up. We also have a fan splitter, and it's got a PWM connector going to it. But then you get 6 3-pin headers and 3 4-pin headers. So it would have been nice if all of them would have been 4-pin instead of just the 3. But if you wanted to swap out the 3 included fans, because you get 1 in the back and 2 in the front, both of them are Fractal Design 140mm fans, but they are just 3-pin fans, so none of them are PWM fans. So if you wanted to swap those out, or say you were going to put a 360 or 420 in the top, these 3 headers are PWM, and they are controlled through this PWM connector on the controller. In the manual, they noted that only this one, or I should say not only, but this is the one that reports the RPM signal back to the motherboard. So whatever you have connected to this, if you wanted to have like a CPU cooler that was PWM controlled and then 2 fans for whatever, that's how you would want to arrange them. So just keep in mind that this is the one that reports back to the motherboard. These 2 do not for the RPM signal. But yeah, it would have been nice to have all of them be PWM, but it is at least nice that you do get a fan splitter, so you do have 6 additional 3-pins if you need them. We have quite a few of these punched standouts. There's one on the inside for tying off cables too. This one's stamped out the other direction. But yeah, so if you wanted to tie off the cables on the back, you've got a good number. I mean, you know, you listen to Bill enough and you can always have more, right?
Yes.
But they also do include these 2 Velcro straps, kind of an easy way to keep probably your 24-pin cable under control as you put those through the grommets. So overall, pretty solid. All right, so now we've got things reconfigured. We took this side wall over and pushed it all the way back to where the alternate is for it. You do have to take out the little bracket for the 5 1/4 inch bay, but that's pretty easy. There's just 2 screws that hold that in. And then there was, what, Bill, 6 screws, I think, that held this side panel thing in. And then you simply push it back, make sure you get all the wires out of the way that you need to get out. And then you do have to have that temporary, or that mid plate in the top. You do have to have that mounted in order to fully secure that side, because 2 of the screws will end up going through the top into that, and then there's 2 screws from the bottom and then 2 on the front, and that's what holds that in place. But do keep in mind that once you do that, you do lose the ability to, you know, use all your 3.5 inch drive trays, because obviously they were hanging off of the back of that plate and you just moved it. So keep that in mind. But that's a pretty clean look. I am gonna have to say though, I wish they would include a mid plate that you could put here, because you could tell that they were thinking about it at one point, because there are 2 little slots. There's one there and one here, and then there's a little lip right on that side. So it definitely looks like they thought about having a cover, and you could probably make one if you were skilled enough, but it would have been nice to have that included, because then you could push that wall back, put a top plate on it, and then the whole front would be covered, the whole bottom would be covered. It'd just be a lot cleaner. But I guess once again, this case retails what, Bill, for $149.99 with the tempered glass side panel?
And $129 without it.
Heck, for $20, I'd probably say spring for the tempered glass, unless you were opposed to it for some reason. But
I absolutely agree with you. Now, the point behind this conversion option is if you're going to do a DIY liquid cooling loop and you want to have big, thick radiator in front, And the front of the Define R6 will fit up to a 360 radiator, and you can put a 420 radiator in the ceiling, providing it's no wider than 147 millimeters. So this is really a callback to the Define S, which had no bays in it whatsoever because it was geared towards liquid coolers.
Yeah, and it is definitely nice to have that option. Just, you know, if you don't need all the 3.5-inch drives, or you don't have anything to hide up here, you just push that back, and I mean, look at all that space. If you had a small enough reservoir and a small enough, or thin enough, I should say, radiator, you could mount your reservoir on that panel if you wanted to. That'd be pretty easy. I don't know. It definitely works pretty well. I just, again, I kind of wish there was a cover here, because I think that would complete it in my eyes, but.
Yeah, who knows what the backstory is behind that.
Probably the most important thing to come in with this case. It's a Fractal Design labeled cloth for your fingerprint removal, because fingerprints are a thing with tempered glass. All right, well, I'm not going to go through everything, but if you really need to know, you know, you can pause the video right here and take a look at all of the individual sets of screws that are included, but this all comes in the accessory box. One thing, if you are going to be changing your standoffs, these are really nice to have. Basically it's like a little socket for the standoffs to take those out with a screwdriver instead of your fingers or pliers and screw them all up. But yeah, vast assortment of screws to put in all your drives and anything else that you need to put in there.
All right, Moss, let's get down to the pros and cons of the new Fractal Design Define R6. I'll share my pros real quick. I really like the side panel latching design that they've come up with. It's a new design. You don't need that slotted rail anymore, wondering if it's in or not. It's much nicer. The module-vent design on top, I'm sure you're going to agree, is the best we've ever seen from Fractal Design. And I like the options that are built into it. So if you're going to want fans up in the top or a radiator, you can remove the metal skin from that top module vent design. I like how the front of the case is vented and how the filters are easily removable, and that seamless tempered glass side panel. How clean is that? That by far is the cleanest tempered glass side panel on the market that I've seen to date. What else? Just the overall look of it, the new nameplate, I like that, how you can move it to the back. Cons, you know what? I'm actually having a hard time trying to figure out cons. Maybe, you know, the fan controller, not all of the pins being PWM. It would have been nice. I don't know like what the cost difference was there. The power supply shroud is riveted in versus screwed in, so you know you can't remove it if you want.
Well, if you really want to, you can.
Yes.
But yeah, it would be nice to be able to just take out a couple of screws and just pop that thing out. But
the 1/8-inch drill bit, gang, that's the answer to any time you have a power supply shroud that's riveted in.
That's right.
So what are your pros and cons?
I think I'm going to have to echo a lot of that, because I definitely agree that I really like that side panel. I like that this matches the color of the case and that it is so clean. You know, that seamless design that they said, you know, it just works really well. Something that I mentioned earlier too, the module-vent redesign, fantastic. Compared to that old one where you had the plastic tabs, and I mean, I think we broke 2 of them just trying to do the review, so this is way nicer. And then also the fact that you can take off the metal skin and you can just have the plastic underneath it for that vent, so it's not a big recess like on the other one. You know, a lot of cases where you have something that you can remove, you end up with a big indentation, and it's nice that this has a pretty flat top even once you remove the metal skin. Other than that, I mean, the standard things that I always love about Fractal Design cases is they just always seem to come through with a really nice quality, especially for the price points. And that's probably the biggest thing for me, is just it's a really nice case for $150 or $149.99 if you want to be 100% accurate. And if you don't need the glass side panel, which I would. I think this is probably what I would do, is get the tempered glass. But if you don't want that, it's again $129.99 for just a solid side panel. So you have that option too. I mean, if you were more worried about sound, go with the solid side panel, because it would also have the same sound insulation as the opposite panel. But I think this just looks really good.
And I didn't know what my feelings would be about the gunmetal finish on it. I really like the finish, and I must also note that this Define R6 is going to be available in 4 different color scenarios. This here is the Gunmetal Grey, also a white version, and then a black version and a blackout version. And we believe the difference between the black and blackout version is that the data storage trays in the black version will be white, which is traditional with Fractal's cases.
And then probably the PCI slots. It seems like a lot of times they'll do the white PCI slot covers too.
Also note is they are going to offer a Type-C port option sold separately. However, we don't have any date of release or the price point it will sell at. But Fractal is aware that some people will want that, so it's going to be sold as an option separately. All right, everybody, thank you for watching this review and overview. Don't forget to check out Mosquito and his YouTube channel. It's Mosquito Mods. He's always got something going on. He's got this epic workshop that he's involved with right now building. And we appreciate any comments, feedback, questions. While we have the case in our possession, we're happy to help you out if you have any questions about the case, or if you're going to do any type of liquid cooling scenarios. I'll also put a link to Fractal's product page for details, and a link to where the case is available for sale. So thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you have an awesome and safe holiday and new year.